I don't still know what the law is, that anything that you post that's not, like, let's say in the subway, for example, anything that you post on the walls in the subway is considered graffiti if it's not sanctioned by the MTA or any entities that governs that area. Like even the light boxes that they have with advertisements in them, while they are geographically part of the MTA, they're owned by private institutions that then sell them to advertisers. And so if you vandalize there, you're gonna have a whole, like, there's all these layers of.
What about a place like Union Square?
Union Square, I think, maybe you'd probably know better than me. I don't think that you can really post, anything.
Anything that belongs to somebody besides you, as a general rule, you're not allowed to post on, write on, mark up, spray paint, or the like. And you as a taxpayer do not get to claim your specific section of this subway car. Like, this is the Bob section from my taxes, so I'll do with it what I want. Now, within that, there's a cascading number of different crimes and penalties depending upon whether, the extent of the damage, what it costs to clean it up, all the way down to things like Post-its, which really you just remove and are considered, benign. But basically, this has been the conflict, the contestation over public space since we started having graffiti, back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, as a former graffiti artist from the 70s, I can tell you that anything you do is considered illegal if it leaves even a non-permanent mark on a piece of public space. The police can arrest you and probably will if they catch you. Although the one time I was caught writing graffiti and wasn't arrested was the time that I actually tagged the cop car.
Oh, goodness.
And the cops caught me, and they were so upset about their car being vandalized that they didn't even know what to do about me. And I said, I'll clean it off for you. And I happened to be like on my block in front of my house. I was 15 years old. And they said, really? I said, yeah, I'll go inside and get some butane lighter fluid and I can clean off this pen. And so this huge cop, he was like 6'7" or something, and I'm 5'4", and I, open the door and my sister's there and these two huge cops are there. I'm like, shh, don't say anything, because my mother's there. And I run into the house quietly, grab the butane, come back out, clean their car, and they went away, and I was never arrested in that incident.
I'm impressed you talked them into allowing you to spray butane all over their car.
Yeah.
Part of the power of what's being done, the fact that it's either illegal or quasi-illegal or arguably illegal, but it's something that's wildly out of context that makes people think about this in these different ways. I mean, if it's just like, oh yeah, another bunch of naked people getting painted, I'm gonna go watch Battlestar Galactica.
I have this great photo of this military man. It's this young guy, he's big, tall, lean guy, and he looks strong, and he looks like he just came from the military, and his wife, and she's like holding his arm, and her mouth is open because we have like a group of naked people there, and she's like looking like, do something, like, what are you gonna do? And he's sort of looking like this. He's like, I don't know what to do. And I think that's the point. And I think it's inspiring to me to keep putting it out there because of the fact that what ends up happening is it ends up like Ron says. I mean, it just becomes more routine, and it actually happens very, very quickly. And I think that basically people have a dysfunctional, not everyone, but a lot of people have dysfunctional relationships with their body because we're growing up in this kind of over-sexualized, over-stimulated environment. And I think that it doesn't take that much to people all of a sudden see themselves and become connected to themselves, because that's really their natural state of being.
Well, and just to
piggyback on that, I mean, both from Matthew, right?
Mhm.
Just, there's a physical connectivity with both of your types of genre of work that I feel that our society is craving and leaning towards.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you have so much interest, legal or not, about people being painted, I mean, first of all, it's a human nature thing, but also the written word and people organically taking their physical hand and putting it on something other than a tablet or a swiping.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just mouth agape with all the response, but it didn't surprise me because of this inherent need for this kind of connectivity.
And I'll just say,
Yeah.
like, when we went down to Union Square Station, my expectation, because the way the press was covering it, was that it was going to be that this was basically like an anti-Trump movement with post-its, and there were some of those. But what I was sort of surprised, now it wasn't right in the beginning, so maybe in the beginning it was more anti-Trump, and then it it wasn't.
Yeah, it was always politically neutral. It was
Yeah.
never meant to be a protest. It was just meant to be an opportunity for people to connect to each other, to feel less isolated.
Did you know, I'm just curious from stats, did you notice, like, were they young kids, older, different, you know,
All
was there-
different
I mean, I'm
ages.
curious from younger kids, like younger adults to be,
Yeah.
were there a lot of those, and what the response from our younger, future leaders?
I think
I'm
that
just curious from your perspective.
there was a much more partisan message from older individuals. And when I say older, I just mean
Yeah.
anyone over 30 probably wrote something that was more about their political ideas, affiliations, anything like that. And then anyone who was, high school, the millennial-ish, it was more about encouraging each other or not. I mean, I don't actually like the Twitter size content. I think condensing ideas that are complex into 10 words is not the best way to communicate. But in this specific example, younger people tended to write in the same way that they would write on a post on social media. I support you, I'm here for you, let's get through this together, really short content. And then people who probably didn't grow up using Twitter or Facebook would actually write how they felt and why they felt that way. It was much more detailed. So I don't know if that is kind of the data you're looking
Your
for.
experience, too,
Yeah.
like what your take on that is, from an artist standpoint.
Yeah, and I think, again, it was a partisan event. It was very charged with the election. It happened, went viral immediately after. But from my standpoint, it was never meant to be a protest, or I was just like a neutral party that said, I'm just going to channel your messages. If this is what you want to say to the world, then that's, whatever. I'm like just the conduit. I'm not going to try and curate.
Going into, psychotherapy practice, because probably a lot of people talking to you. Did you put out the shingle?
Yeah, a lot of people say that to me, and I have zero interest to be a licensed therapist. I think that it provides a legal barrier between me and individuals, and so I would lose my license immediately, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Matthew, I'd like to get at what got you to where you are today. I
Okay.
think it's very respectable. You've made a great impact on the city and probably on the whole globe. So I'd like to ask you maybe where you studied, what your major was, what other things you did leading up to this, and when you were younger, what were the things that you did? Because usually an artist, when they're younger, they're doing something that really follows through to when they're older. So just bring us how you got here. And as well, I was talking with Andy before, and it was sort of hard to define you. And
Yeah.
so I think you even hit it, an artist, a performance artist, a social activator,
Right.
so sort of flesh it out.
I kind of take is it Alan Capro? Am I saying that name right? I know Capro's right, but I think it's Alan. And he was a performance artist and did a lot of things before performance art was named, I guess. And he classically called himself an unartist, and he did a lot of projects that, you know, he'd have somebody licking jam off a car on a street. And if anybody asked them what they were doing, they wouldn't say they were doing art or that they were doing something special. They would just pretend like it was just an everyday, normal, average thing. And in that way, it didn't create a divide between the artist and the participant, or the artist and the participant and the observer. You know, it was this meshing of the world and art, because right now I think that a lot of people feel like there's this huge separation of the two. And for me, just to touch on, you know, like labels or what I would call myself, if I say, yeah, I did that project, that's my art, I'm an artist, people go, oh, okay, and then kind of wash their hands of it. And then they go, oh yeah, that's just, you know, whatever things that artists do. And I don't think you have to be an artist to sit at a table and have a conversation with people in your community. You don't. Maybe I'm, you know, artistic or foolish enough to do it in a way that other people wouldn't, but I don't think that makes me that different. But starting when I was really young, I had a really strong desire to help other people. Even I used to play a lot of video games with my brother, and he would get really bummed when I would win, you know, if I was much better at a game than him. And so I kind of learned how to like lose well. And so not necessarily at the cost of myself, but I figured out very early on how to shape shift to be more of the gray matter in between individuals than being an individual myself. And I was a peer counselor, and I was really interested as I got older in healing arts like shamanism or psychotherapy, or even conversation amongst friends, I think, is something that really helps people to develop and grow and heal. And I studied creative arts at San Jose State. I wanted to be a graphic design teacher at first, but then decided I didn't really want to work for I didn't want to be like a part of a design firm, which is really like how I would I didn't really want to be a tool. And and so I studied all kinds of different art, and I landed on performance art because I realized you could go out into the world and explore an idea through action. And then after school, I'd done a ton of customer service. I loved interfacing with the community, coffee shops, bar, you know, front desk at a rock climbing gym, whatever it was. And then I started working in education. I worked with students with autism, doing kind of behavioral therapy, and I was really interested in crisis management and how people, when they're in crisis, can de-escalate from that crisis through some sort of facilitation. And so I kind of just like pieced all these things together that ended up culminating in me doing subway therapy. Right before I came to New York, I was in Seoul, in South Korea, teaching English. And I crashed on a motorbike just before coming back in Indonesia. Yeah. My best friend, who we promised each other we would live together after we graduated from university. He got a job as an attorney in New York, and I was planning on moving here. And then I crashed, and I had 2 months on my back feeling terrible. I was in a Korean hospital for 3 weeks, and then I came back and got skin graft, and then I was thinking a lot about if I didn't have my family, and I didn't have family or friends to talk to, you know, I was isolated enough as it was, and I still had that support. So what about people who don't have family or friends or access to therapy or religion or some kind of community that they feel a part of? Like, what do they do to feel better about the things that they feel bad about? And I wanted to explore the idea of absolution through action. Because in the Catholic tradition, you can go to confession. And while there's a whole host of problems with that as a thing that some people do, and there's guilt, and it maybe works but maybe doesn't for a lot of people. That's amazing that you could go into this environment, say what you need to say, and then you walk away. And you don't just feel better, or you haven't just like worked through it. Ideally, it's gone. You've like let it out, and it's gone. You're absolved. And I thought, how could people feel like that in the secular world? In coffee shops, at a bar, in the subway, where could this happen? And so my first project was called New York Secret Keeper. And I set up a table with 2 chairs, and I put up a sign that said Secret Keeper, and I had a book of secrets. And I would tell people, hey, maybe you're walking around, you have this weight that you're walking around with, and you can basically give it to me. And you write it down in this book of secrets, or you can talk to me about it. And then when you walk away, the exchange is that secret's mine. And I'm going to carry it for you, so it's not so heavy. But you kind of have to give it away. So when you walk away, I want you to feel lighter. And you can, I guess, that was the framework of the project. And it was super funny. And people told me this is in different subway stations in Brooklyn and in Manhattan and at Union Square, at 6th Avenue on the L train, or 3rd Ave, whatever. And people said the gnarliest things. And
What was the worst thing that somebody confessed to? I'm interested professionally in confessions.
no. Well, that was kind of it, is that I would tell people that they could tell me a secret, but I wasn't necessarily going to keep it. I was going to reveal their secret as if it was mine. And in that way, they could share their secret with other people through me. And then other people who maybe had the same secret could feel like they weren't alone if I posted it on wherever. I didn't really do it for that long even. I didn't really encounter any like worst ones. They were just, like somebody would be like, I'm on mushrooms right now, like stuff like that. Nothing particularly incriminating. Nobody said like I murdered anyone, or sometimes people would write down that they had sex with somebody questionable, or, nothing that legally sensitive. But then I was talking to this one woman, and she goes, I don't want to like write down anything. I just want, can we just have a conversation? I was like, yeah, sure. She goes, I fucking hate my boyfriend's ex-wife. And I fucking hate my boyfriend's best friend. This is a girl, and they slept together once, and I wish they weren't friends. And I was like, I hate him too. And at the end, she let like 3 or 4 trains go by, and at the end of a 20-minute conversation of just her, complaining, and we're laughing and having fun. And she says, this is awesome. This is like therapy. And I was like, maybe I should get some wall art. And so then from then on, I changed the project to Subway Therapy. And then after the election, and then for 9 months I was doing Subway Therapy. Table, 2 chairs, wall art, certificate of achievement. And after the election, I wanted to reach a broader audience, and my experience in education led me to believe that people were speechless and weren't going to really want to talk to me. It almost felt like Subway Therapy was a joke at that point, because if I would have been sitting there, people would be like, fuck you, I'm really sad today. So I didn't want to do that. And so I just brought up a bunch of writing materials, paper, pens, sticky notes, tape, a bunch of stuff. And then sticky notes were the easiest thing for people to do. And then within hours, it was going viral, and it was in the news that night. And then I've been doing that ever since. Different projects like that. I'm really curious too about, there's a lot of digital connection through Facebook and Instagram and all, a whole host of different social media outlets. But from what people told me and from what I kind of noticed, it seemed like having a physical, tangible thing was a much better way to channel expression than posting it on Facebook. I think a lot of people, and myself included, I opened up Facebook on the day of, after, and I was like, what is happening? Like, who, you know, like, a lot of people were just on fire, but not really channeling it into anything useful, and they're kind of just yelling, and I'm like, who are you yelling at? Like the 200 people that ideologically are in line with you? Like, that doesn't make sense, you know, and so I just thought there needed to be something else.
It's like, so with the sticky notes and how it's kind of evolved with body notes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think is going to be quite interesting is that, you know, people are going to have, and women will have this saying on their chest.
Yeah.
And people, the public, will have to literally look at these breasts and read the message and kind of, I think it's going to be a really interesting interaction of, you're seeing, I guess, the nudity on a body, on a person, and it isn't anonymous. You're actually seeing their saying.
Sure.
And, you know, unlike with body painting day where people kind of, you know, look at the art and you can just kind of see a beautiful image and look away. Here, if you actually want to read those words, you have to actually stare at that person's body to do it. And I think that that's a really interesting connection that's going to happen. That's, I mean, I don't know how that's going to play
I think it's
out.
gonna be
You know,
great.
it's going to be really weird. Like all these people, like really staring at people's bodies. You know,
It's good.
I sense you support people's freedoms and try and protect them from the system and play the other side. Whether it's somebody expressing First Amendment rights, and so you stand up for Andy and Spencer Tunick. On the other hand, I guess you feel it's important to be on the side of anyone to be represented against the law, to have the sort of equal balance, so it's not a totalitarian state. Have you ever represented anybody and felt maybe you were morally crossing a line because you knew they were a criminal, knew they were doing something wrong, and then maybe gotten them out of a situation where you felt maybe they were guilty and that, in essence, you protected their rights, but maybe things...
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that particular question. So let's see if I can do it relatively succinctly. I certainly believe everybody has a right to representation, but everybody does not have a right to me. I am not a bus. I don't stop at every corner. You insert your fare in the $700, $800, $900 an hour, or whatever it is I charge people, and then I drive you, to the next stop. I make decisions about the clients that I represent, and that means that people hold me much more accountable for the people I represent than they do lawyers who have managed to fool people into thinking that money is a neutral moral quality. Of course I will represent this person if he only had the fee, but he doesn't, which is why I'm representing Monsanto Corporation, because they do. So I'm called upon to justify my client base. I am a First Amendment, fairly close to a First Amendment absolutist. I'm starting to rethink some of those ideas in light of the attacks I've seen on marginalized communities and the challenging in public space of their very right to exist. I'm beginning to not think that First Amendment absolutism is the greatest thing in the world. Another discussion to have at some point. But I represent people who I want to represent. I think they're doing something important. I think they're making a contribution. I think this is a valuable contribution, and I want to contribute, which is often what I end up doing, contribute my time and my skills to supporting them and defending them. Most of the people that I represent are criminals in the sense that they did what they're accused of doing. They are over-criminalized. They are attacked primarily because of their race or their class or their sexual orientation or perceived sexual orientation, or sometimes, just had a really, really, really bad day and a gun, and you know how that shit goes. not well. But if the question is, which is usually what underlies those, how would you feel, or have you ever been in a situation where somebody did a really bad thing, a really awful and violent thing to another human being, and you got that person off on a technicality, and that person went out and did it again? And the answer is, that never happens. Never happened to me. And never happens to anybody, because first of all, people who clearly did really awful, terrible, violent things, they don't get off. They don't get off on technicalities. They don't get off on the evidence. The guy who's standing there with the smoking gun in his hand, the video of the shooting, and who makes the confession, he's not getting off. I mean, the question is, will he live or die? Will he do 50 years or maybe be eligible for parole after 25? I know he's getting off. And most people who actually do genuinely horrible things, they're usually one-offs. Like, I've had some people who I have done bad things to other people, got them off not on technicalities, and they were kind of one-off things. And almost invariably, people, not to suggest for a second that murder is justified, because it's not, but frequently the decedent, as we like to call them, we don't like the term victim in defense world, the decedent in many ways became the author of his or her own destruction. Think bar fight. Think, hey, where the fuck did you do that? There's people do sort of destructive things on both sides. One goes to the morgue, the other usually prison.
And I, for one, am very appreciative of the fact that I've been selected as one of those bus stops.
I have a question for you. So sometimes when you're dealing with the cops, it's, on terms of just legality. But other times, and I've seen videos where they're just like the children. And I think that that's something that I've definitely heard a lot, and I'm sure that you've heard a lot as well, is like the morality aspect. And that's something that's definitely more difficult to kind of discuss with whether it be authority or even just the public. And so I'm just interested in how do you usually approach those situations?
I mean, there was a period of time where I was painting where there was a restriction where I was only able to do full nude body painting after dark. And it was crazy, and there was no legal basis for that restriction. And it was really weird because what I was doing became like almost like, I remember that a bunch of years ago there was a Showtime After Dark. It was when they showed like these like soft, softcore kind of movies, and it was like I became body painting after dark. It was
Panties come off after dark was the headline.
Was
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so people talk about the children quite a bit, and my feeling is that the same thing. I think that there's a perception, maybe it's a lot of words, I don't know, but there's a sort of a perception that there's like a child, and then the child is innocent and believes in ideas and dreams, and then that child becomes part of society, and then we sort of throw all of those things away. And I think the reason why people raise their kids that way is because there's this idea that if you're going to go to a place where there's really no real ideas and dreams, then at least let the kid have this fantasy for as long as it is before his childhood is up and his life becomes sort of boring and meaningless. I think there's a lot of, even though people don't like saying it that way, I think that there's a lot of mindset, because to me, I look at life as a continuum. So I think the child and the grown-up as really the same. And I think that people are trying to hide things from the children because the things that they might see are things that might reveal this dark adult world that they're trying to protect them from. This inevitability that they're going to have to get, but not yet. I don't believe that. I believe that that we can actually have all the things that we want in life, and even when we fail, we succeed to some extent. And living your dreams is in and of itself valuable and powerful. We're not going to get rid of hatred. We're not going to get rid of negativity. But on the same token, we have an opportunity when we're here to do the best we can. And so I think the idea of showing what's going on to the children and not trying to protect the children from reality is at the core of of my belief.
Well, but the nudity is considered dirty, or the nudity is rated X. But the idea of seeing nudity, and it isn't necessarily sexuality or porn, all of that, you're just seeing naked bodies. And so that's what really, I think, pushes the envelope.
I think a lot of people, when they were like at a certain age, really go out and they just try to like, you know, score a lot, especially guys. And I think that when they do that, they sort of, that's why when they see nudity, their reaction is like, you know, when I see a naked girl, my reaction is, oh, this is my opportunity. And I think
my question more pertains to like, if someone is confronting you, like what you're doing is immoral, like, oh my God, they're children, they're kids, are you trying to kind of explain to them the morality or the kind of the ideas behind it, or do you just sort of let them experience it and kind of come to their own conclusions?
I mean, it's more the second. I think that what I find is that when people confront you, they're actually having their own inner confrontation, because a person could look at it, think, I think this guy's immoral, and walk away. But the fact that somehow this kind of came out, and some woman came up to us and she goes, that's disgusting, you know what I mean? And there's really not much you could say to that person, so we just sort of say, you know, thank you very much. And then I think, I don't know, but I think maybe she goes home that night and she's like, I don't know, was that really disgusting? Why was that disgusting? Because I think the reason she's bringing it out is because there's a part of her that says, that's actually not disgusting. And then the part that's sort of maintaining that way of seeing things is like kind of blurting out. So it's like almost like the person has their own inner turmoil. And I've already done my job by putting that in play, and then I'm sort of out.
I have another question for you, actually. I can't help, you mentioned sort of the Twitter association, and I can't help when I see like those post-its, that short, kind of these little like, peace, love, and happiness, or I accept you. And I always sort of have a little bit of resentment towards that, because it's this, I call it kind of this like soft activism in a way, where they're saying like, oh, I believe everyone should be, you know, accepting and loving, and then they put in their share, and then they're done, and it's like, what have they done? So do you ever feel like it's kind of, since it is these sort of, it almost is giving people like an easy way out to feel like they're helping a cause by just writing down a couple words?
It's a great question, and it's something I think about a lot. I'm really interested in agency. Why and how you would encourage someone to be more active or to do something. You know, for me right now, I'm not really encouraging anybody to do anything in an unsolicited kind of way, but I do give a lot of free advice, or I, you know, do a project called Ask Levee now, where people can ask me questions and then I give them answers to those questions, and usually they're about you know, relationships, dating, jobs, goals, how to achieve them, stuff like that. But anyway, subway therapy was an opportunity for people to really kind of sit down, they're activated by it, they sit down, they have a conversation, and then at the end of it, maybe they walk away with something. You know, the sticky notes were a really fast way for people to access soft activism. And my intention, again, wasn't for it to be a protest or an opportunity for people to participate in like a group activation or activism thing.
Right.
And so in that way, it didn't really bother me that people were writing things that maybe had no effect to cause political change. The design of the project was more for a release, because I think individually writing something personally affected whoever had the agency to write on their own, but also people walking by who never actually did it felt good, even though they never wrote something. And so I think that collective was really important too. You know, again, since my objective wasn't to encourage people to be really active, I think there's a bigger picture. So if someone sees the project and says, wow, one guy did that, I'm gonna do something like that too. And I've gotten lots of emails from people that said, don't ever do anything, but because I saw your project, I now want to do a project like yours. Is it okay if I do a sticky note thing too? And I say, yeah, sure, awesome. You know, I'll give you all this information so that you can do something like that too. So I'm not a huge fan of people thinking, I gotta go out and do something for the world. Right on the sticky note. Like, that's not, you know, like that I don't think that passes for doing something in the world. But I do think that maybe for some people who were walking by and were having a terrible day and were struggling because they were like, how am I going to get to work today? And then they wrote on a note and then felt better and then went to work and like didn't have the worst day ever. I don't really care what they wrote. It's just, you know, it was important to them. But I see your point, and I think that you're on the right track there. That I don't really encourage that kind of activism.
Well, I'm sure it does, though, stimulate, you know, individual activism in its own way. I mean, it depends on the person and where they're at that point, and you know what they write, and you know, I think there is something to having having something tangible to put on a wall instead of something that we have in this, you know,
Digital
abstract,
platform.
right? You can just say something and it's there, and now it's like, okay, here I'm leaving my physical mark.
And even on Instagram, you find, you know, people can follow my Instagram, but it's not going to stay active. It's not going to stay. People love things that are pretty. The project was really pretty. I mean, it was visually very interesting. I never really intended for it to be that way. It reached a critical mass and it became very visually stimulating. That wasn't my intention from the beginning, and a bunch of people followed it or followed the Instagram or were really passionate about it. And you have this spike with any kind of social issue or any kind of crisis or event. You have like this spike of interest and then it tapers off. I didn't do it because I was excited about the election. I was doing it before, and then I'm going to continue to do it, right? But for a lot of people in that moment, that's why they were doing it. And they didn't even, I think a lot of people maybe didn't even really want to do a lot. They didn't want, you know, or they couldn't, and so that was just something that they could do. And I hope that answers your question.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hey.
Quick question about, you know, like attribution. So in today's day and age, social media, things spread very fast. And you mentioned if somebody's interested in doing something similar to what you do, you'll give them certain information. But how do you navigate, I guess, to both you and Andy, somebody doing something exactly or like very close to what you're doing and not attributing it back to you? How do you feel about that? How do you navigate that?
I mean, you kind of have a
Yeah.
medium that we have another painter in here that paints on nude models. So how do you?
I mean, generally, I don't care. I mean, there's this one person who, for the past year or two, like created body painting day on the same day in New York that I'm doing, and
What?
then
Yeah.
people are like kind of like coming and they're like, "Here I am," or you know, like they're confusing the two,
Whoa.
and I just thought it was like really unnecessary to do that. I think that it was sort of done with not really positive intentions. Because people are showing up at the wrong site or they're asking questions, and this person basically
God.
didn't get accepted into one of my body painting days, and then
Yeah.
she was mad and maybe a little, you know. But nonetheless, I think that for me, it's not about the event or about me. I think it's really about the idea, and you know, I think anything that what we're doing that sparks any activity, whatever it looks like, that is promoting, you know, human connection, individual empowerment, but also group empowerment, expression, and to see each other as individuals, despite the whether, you know, whatever their political affiliation, whatever they look like, you know, is the more we can keep doing that, the more we could spread that, the more successful everything that we're doing is. So I'm happy about it.
I have a very similar feeling about attribution. When there were so many things that were sort of exactly the same form, but for me, you know, if my medium was sticky notes, people expressing themselves via sticky notes, publicly in a space, and then kind of, you know, whatever, just posting them up. That's something that teachers have been doing forever. You know, I did that with my mom. When my dad had heart surgery, we wrote notes and put them up, you know, in his hospital. I mean, I've done things like that, and other people have used sticky notes forever for a variety of different purposes. Immediately after everything went viral, I was up. I think I had gotten lunch at the hot bar at Whole Foods, and I went into a Bank of America, which is right above Union Square, and they had a sticky note wall that said, you know, what's your New Year's, you know, wish or something? What's your intention for 2017? And I was like, it's possible that they do that every year. I don't know. But, you know, maybe they saw that form and they're like, wow, a lot of people are doing this. This is a good way to have a connection with the community. And from that standpoint, you know, I went in because I was curious, and I wrote my intention for 2017, and I didn't say that I was doing this project or anything like that. I just thought it was entertaining. I wanted to hear what his purpose was. And it was a guy trying to show that at this particular Bank of America, they're more about being engaged in the community, and they have like a lounge upstairs where people can get free coffee and stuff. And I was like, this is fine. Even if it wasn't fine, I would have just walked away. But I thought it was cool they were doing that. And then some individuals, like Andy, will contact me and say, hey, do you want to like be a part of this in some way? You know, I have nothing to do with painting on nude people. I would also have nothing to do with painting on nude people in a project called Body Notes, where there are people with messages written on their chest. I don't have anything to do with that. But I really appreciate being a part of this. And I like sitting here having this conversation. And so in some ways, I almost feel like the attribution is not really something that's personally anything. I think it just speaks really well of the people that do it. Like for individuals that reach out to me and say, hey, I saw your thing, I want to do it. I want to give them resources or be available or try and be as helpful as possible. And if people don't want to do that, then I don't know. I think it just says something more about them than you know. I don't have a lot of feelings about it. That was a really long explanation.
Well, and I'll just add that, you know, when I saw the project, and we were in a situation where last year we had body painting day, and we ended up rejecting like this enormous number of people. And so I was thinking I really would like to do another body painting project in New York that could sort of be more model focused, because we just had all this excess models. And then it came to me shortly after the sticky note, we visited Union Square Station, and I just never really, it just felt like, I don't know, like I guess a lot of people, or I don't know, I mean, a lot of people see things in that way, where it's sort of like where the idea came from, or who gets credit of an idea. Like, I don't really, the thought of doing it, it's not just a matter of doing it and contacting Matthew and saying, you know, I just want you to know we're doing this or something. It's more like, you know, I want to acknowledge it because what he did was, you know, really a tremendous thing, and had, I think, for especially during the peak period, I think it had an enormous impact on the whole psyche of the city, and I think that's something that, you know, in a way it doesn't go away, and that's why, you know, there's so many other things going on with it. But for me, it was like to have Matthew participate, not just give his blessing, but to actually participate, you know, honestly, is an honor for me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because at the core of what we both do is a connection between other people. So you can't do it in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So it doesn't kind of make sense to keep it.
I mean, I was painting by myself for like, I don't know, whatever, like in the streets for like, say, 6 or 7 years.
With a model. or
Me and a
person.
model, I'm sorry,
Right.
yeah, I was painting models by my, but I was the only artist. And then, yeah, I know, I didn't do that.
You need people to you know, engage with the therapy.
And after, then people were, after all the legal battles and were won, several people came to me and they said, you should, do a group with all the other artists. And I have to admit, I was like, I don't know, but then I did it, and it's just the power that it had was just like multiplied so much. And I don't know, I think the more that we hold on to ourselves or hold on to our art so much, like, it's like, I think it's a contradiction, like, in other words, you're doing art to sort of spread an idea, but then after that, you're like, but I want the credit. I think it's sort of like, we live in a capitalist situation, so you kind of are like, always like, well, how am I monetizing this? But that monetizing sort of undermines the real purpose of what you're trying to do. Personally, I live in the moment very, very heavily, and when I make the work is true to that moment. I try not to look back so much, and I think of art only being significant if there's somebody to see it. So I think that it's all about connection, and I think that there's a lot of things around us that sort of trigger us towards more divisiveness and more ego and more ownership mentality. And of course, as I say, like, the whole economic system is based on it. But on the same token, art has this incredible power, and it has this ability to sort of impact the environment. So I just try to stay true to myself. And if I wake up one day and I don't feel like painting anymore, like, I'm fine with that. I don't think anything's better than anything else. Just be true to yourself. I think if you are true to yourself, if people were true to themselves, I think the world would become so much more beautiful on so many levels so quickly. It would be like, that's just what I believe. So for me, the best thing I could do is just encourage people to trust and love themselves, because then people trust and love each other.
All right. That's a good note to end on, and thank you, panelists, and thank you.